During this hour today, we are bringing you a special live broadcast about a topic that generates a lot of attention, emotion, and frankly, misinformation: homelessness in Austin. We will hear from people experiencing homelessness, from elected officials, from neighborhood and civic groups, from activists, from police, and from service providers. So why are we doing this show today, this summer? A couple of reasons. One, the Austin City Council, by the end of this month, will begin discussions on placing a shelter of some kind in each of Austin's 10 city council districts. And two, people are still reacting to changes approved earlier this summer to rules governing sitting, lying, and camping in public. KUT's Andrew Weber has been covering these ordinances for years, as well as the recent changes, and we'll start with him this morning to lay a foundation for our discussion.
Okay, let's start with what the rules used to be. There are bans for camping and sitting or lying down in public, and another ban on aggressive solicitation or panhandling. Let's start with that one. City law banned asking people for money in ways that made them feel uncomfortable. You couldn't do it at crosswalks, you couldn't yell at people, you couldn't follow people or loiter around ATMs, or ask people for money at all between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. in the downtown area. Opponents argued it was unconstitutional and that it banned speech. Plan to cut.
Now, you just take the ask for money out of that law, and it's aggressive confrontation. So you can't yell at somebody, continue to follow them, get in their face, and scare them with your actions. So it just took the act of asking for money out of that equation.
That's APD Assistant Chief Justin Newsom. He heads up enforcement downtown. Next up, the ordinance known as No Sit, No Lie. It banned resting on public rights of way like sidewalks in the downtown area. Newsom says APD's internal rule was to warn people and then give them a 30-minute window to move. That's changed now to prohibit obstruction of a sidewalk. That means if you're blocking part of a sidewalk, it's okay under city law.
So if you're sitting against a building and there's plenty of room for people to pass by, then you can sit there as long as you want. You can go to sleep there if you want, because that no longer fits the elements of the ordinance.
Finally, the camping ordinance. City law used to ban camping in public areas like city parks. Enforcement-wise, it was pretty cut and dry for police. Somebody had a tent or bedding in a public place, it was against the rules. Now, as long as you're not on private property or on city land.
Come July 1st, the act of just having the tent itself or the mattress is no longer illegal. And so the tent or mattress or whatever it is has to be completely blocking the passageway.
But there's an important caveat underpinning all of these ordinances.
There has to be something present that is a health and safety danger that the officer could testify to in order to even ask the person to move.
And this is something that police already have to do. For example, if someone's drunk and they're a danger to themselves or others, they write them up for public intoxication. This puts more onus on officers to interpret whether something is illegal rather than just strictly enforce. At least anecdotally, in the very, very early days of the new rules, Newsom said it's had a bit of a chilling effect on enforcement. Officers aren't always sure how to enforce rules. But that doesn't mean people should panic, he says, because the future isn't written. And he thinks the overall discussion around the new ordinances has become polarized, in that with the uncertainty surrounding the new rules, people are assuming the worst.
You know, it's just that's a common thing, and so people are automatically assuming that because these ordinance changes, there are going to be tent cities that pop up. And you know what? They might be right and they might be wrong. It's just too soon to tell right now. And so, yeah, I think some more time needs to pass. We need to really evaluate what's truthfully going on with data and see what recommendations we can come up with to adjust where we are right now.
So, Andrew, the ordinance revisions have only been in effect for about a month, but what are you seeing and what have people been reporting to you more anecdotally?
Anecdotally, a lot of folks are pointing out that there are a lot more sort of elaborate setups for camps in a lot of like familiar spots like Ben White and Pack Saddle and up north at 183 in Cameron. But I think, personally, I think that the new ordinances have highlighted an issue that's always been there. That they didn't create more homeless people, they've always sort of been there.
KUT's Andrew Weber, we thank you for your coverage this morning. We are now going to spend some time talking about these ordinance changes and the impacts with our first panel this morning: Austin Mayor Steve Adler, Austin Police Chief Brian Manley, DeWitt Peart, President and CEO of Downtown Austin Alliance, and Chris Harris, Data and Policy Analyst for Just Liberty, a bipartisan organization dedicated to what they describe as comprehensive criminal justice reform in Texas. Thank you, and welcome to our panel this morning. We're very glad to have you here. So, Chris, I actually want to start with you. You had pushed for changes to the ordinances that we've been talking about sitting, lying down, panhandling, camping in public. In your view, what was the problem with those ordinances as they were originally written?
Sure. So there were three primary issues with the ordinances. They were inhumane, illogical, and illegal. So firstly, they outlawed sitting and lying in a big part of downtown, as well as camping throughout the city. Every single person has to sit, has to lie, has to sleep. And by virtue of criminalizing this behavior on all public property, if someone does not have private property on which they are able to access, that meant that their very existence was criminalized. They could not sleep without threat of a ticket. They could not sit down. They could not lie down. And so in this way, it was inhumane. Some of the legal issues have been brought up, particularly as it relates to panhandling. This is a clear First Amendment issue, and these types of ordinances have been struck down around the country. And we've also seen camping ordinances struck down around the country. Just in 2017, Boise, Idaho's anti-camping law was struck down in Martin v. Idaho, or Martin v. Boise, and said that if you do not have adequate shelter space in your community, then you cannot outlaw sleeping outside. And we've had a similar dearth of shelter space in our community for years. And so we have the same situation here, and so it's very likely that it's illegal. And then finally, it's just illogical to try to make people that are homeless, in poverty, pay a fine or potentially go to jail if they cannot do that.
Mayor Adler, I want to ask you, we talked recently about these changes, and you told me homelessness is the city's top priority, one of the top priorities. I'm curious, though, we've had, over 2,000 people in the city who don't have a permanent place to live. That's been the case for many years. These ordinances have been on the books for many years. It seems to some like this has kind of cropped up all of a sudden this summer. Why is all of this happening now?
I don't think this is something that's crept up over the summer. This has been a challenge in our community for some time, and certainly over the last several years it's becoming more and more visible, and more people are demanding action. That's one of the reasons why the council identified it as the highest priority in the city a year and a half ago. But I'll tell you, over the last year, I've been to neighborhood meetings down in Onion Creek talking about camps that are under the overpass at Slaughter Lane and I-35. I've walked some of these camps with the neighborhoods under Ben White at Backsaddle. I mean, this is a challenge throughout our community, and it is a challenge that is growing more visible as we develop as a city, and more people move out of the woods and under the overpasses and out into our streets. It is a challenge we have that is literally just becoming more visible. And there are a lot of people in our community that say, in a city like Austin that's doing so well, we ought to be able to do better. For the 2,000 people that are experiencing homelessness on our streets on any given night. I think that finally the community said, these ordinances we've had in place have not been doing the job. We refuse to keep going back into neighborhoods and act like there's nothing that we can do. I think we have a community that is ready to do what it takes in order to be able to address two concerns. The first is the concern about people. These are our neighbors. These are people that we can, in fact, get back into constructive and productive lives. We can certainly provide them safer, better places to be. We're also concerned about our public spaces in this community, and the answer to both of those concerns is the same. We just have to find people homes and support services to go with them. We can do that. And I'll tell you, this is the #1 challenge in our city, and I think we are demonstrating over the last few weeks the resolve in this community to actually act, and I'm encouraged by that. And I think that you're going to see the action by the council. The new budget coming from the manager is going to reflect that this is the time.
Chief Manley, the new versions of the ordinances, as we've been hearing, seem to leave a lot open to interpretation. So how are you telling officers to now address this? How are you telling them to implement the revisions to the ordinances?
So the biggest change for the street officer with the changes to the ordinances really is in that area of gaining voluntary compliance in a lot of situations where we were either called to by a citizen or business owner or officers came upon during their routine patrols. The data showed two different things. Number one, the on-duty officers were handling the majority of these interactions either through the voluntary compliance or through the citations that were issued. Very rarely were arrests made through these last 2 years. Then we had an on-duty initiative that was funded through the Downtown Austin Alliance, and the data from a year's worth of that showed there were over 8,000 interactions by the officers working that assignment, and 98% of those were handled again with voluntary compliance. So what we've asked the officers to do now with the changes to the ordinances, obviously, is to comply with them and to only take action when the new ordinance language has been met, and that is that the conduct is either hazardous or dangerous to the individual involved or to others that may either be in that space or walking through. So similar to what we have to do with other laws like public intoxication, when we have to determine that the person is not only intoxicated but is also a danger to themselves or someone else, the officers have to use that same discretion in determining whether this person's conduct, whether it be sitting or lying or camping, is also dangerous or hazardous to themselves or others, or is creating that public health risk.
So, Chief, we got quite a few questions from people who specifically want to know where people can and cannot camp. Can you just briefly explain what the ordinances now say about that? There was a lot of concern about locations for camping and trash and other problems that could potentially build up around those.
Sure. So the prohibitions are on city parkland where it has always been prohibited, and then on certain pieces of city-owned land as well. And then throughout this, nobody lost any of your private property rights. In other words, people cannot establish camping or sit and lie on privately owned property unless they have permission of that landowner. So that's what we've got as far as the locations where it applies.
Chief, also, we got a lot of questions about people wanting to know what's happened so far. I realize it's only been a month. There's not a lot of data to work with, but are you seeing more camps being set up? Are you seeing problems around those areas? What are you seeing and what are you hearing about now that we're about a month in?
So, I mean, we're hearing and seeing the same things I think the community is hearing and seeing, and that is that although the locations may not be different than they were in the past, there are new locations where people are camping, but in a lot of places where they've been camping, there are more people camping there, or they are much more elaborate in that there are the mattresses, or there are more elaborate structures that people have put up to sleep in.
Have there been more problems around these areas, though? People seem to be concerned that the creation of those camps will lead, some people say, to more crime, more problems. What are you seeing about that?
So that's the data we're collecting right now. We're just a month in. We've not analyzed the outcome of that yet, but we do have officers reporting when they're either called to the scene of incidents or when they see it upon themselves, whether or not they are able to take action in these situations, and then if they're not, is it a result of the change in the ordinance? We want to be able to provide as much information as we can into this discussion that we know is going to take place in the coming months to better understand the impacts of the changes to this ordinance. Now, with all data, we can only work with the information that we have. And so, you know, if we've got a community that is no longer calling because they've either had us come out once before and we told them that we couldn't take action, or because they're believing that we can, then that's going to have to be taken into account when we look at this data. But again, we're 1 month in and we're working on collecting the information we can.
Dee Peart with Downtown Austin Alliance, I'm curious, this is not a question unique to downtown, but from what you're hearing about downtown businesses, are there concerns about how the ordinance changes could impact or might already be impacting businesses downtown? What are you hearing?
Well, absolutely. I think the business community downtown is, concerned about what the future holds. Coming off of Chief Manley's comments on some of the data. So it has been a month. You know, we manage Republic Square Park downtown. We manage program it. Before the ordinance changes, we had, it varied between 2 to 4 people who were camping at Republic Square Park. The experience now is between 18 and 20 people. So in the last month, we've seen a tremendous increase in the number of people that are camping Republic Square. So the neighbors in and around Republic Square are concerned about that. We have our ambassador program. So we have the individuals in the red shirts that clean and provide ambassador services to the general public. So we have 45 individuals. So we track the data, their encounters every day. And over the last month, they have asked individuals to comply. So this compliance issue over obstructions in the right-of-way. Our ambassadors historically have had a 90% compliance rate. In the month of July, it's been 62% compliance. And there's almost, the reports that we get, there's almost now like a belligerence in the community that they're dealing with. Now, I want to be very careful because we, the community, the business community, we tend to conflate all of these issues around homeless individuals, individuals experiencing homeless. We're on the street, we're dealing with individuals on the street. This is not necessarily all homeless related, right? This is basically a public order issue. So our interactions on the street go well beyond just dealing with people with homeless issues. And one last item I'd like to mention is the sleeping and lying. So our ambassadors had encountered about 2,000 individuals a month that were sleeping or lying on the streets in Austin. That number over July has gone up to 4,000 individuals a month, over 4,000. So we are seeing an uptick in the activity on the streets in downtown.
You are listening to a special live broadcast about homelessness in Austin from Studio 1A. This is KUT 90.5. It's 9:23. I want to ask this question to everybody now, and feel free, all four of you, to hop in as we're discussing this. How do you all envision, or how do you see balancing the needs of people in Austin who are experiencing homelessness and need some attention and care? How do you balance that with the needs of businesses or neighbors or public safety or health concerns? How, in your mind and in your work and in implementing this, how do you all balance those? Anybody feel free to hop in.
The answer to both of the challenges is to find homes for people, put them in a safer, better place that gets people off the streets, that ends the camping. It actually puts people in a better, safer place. They're better able to get the wraparound services. So the answer to both concerns is exactly the same. You know, we haven't created any more homeless people experiencing homelessness over the last month. They're more visible. Instead of on a bedroll, they're in a tent. But it's still the same person. It's still the same person that needs a place to stay. You know, I hear that there are more people now camping in Republic Square Park. Of course, they're not allowed to camp in Republic Square Park, so I would expect our police and officers to tend to that, because you're not allowed to camp in parks in our city. But that's not really the challenge. The challenge is when we walk up to someone and we say, "You can't be here," and they say, "Okay, I'm ready to comply." They're gathering up their stuff, and they look at us and they say, "Now, where is it that you want me to go?" We don't have an answer to that question. So the 98% compliance, when our police officers go out and threaten someone with arrest or ticket and they voluntarily move, you have to ask yourself, where are they moving to? And where they are moving to is down the street in front of the next business, who then calls our police officers. And you and I and taxpayers are spending millions of dollars having our police officers move these people from here to there to over there to over there to under our bridges over and over and over again. And I am tired of wasting taxpayer dollars not addressing the situation and just moving people around who are trying to comply, but living in a city where it is impossible to be able to comply because we have failed to provide the answer, where is it that you should go? I don't want compliance of someone who gets up and moves to another business or who gets up and moves to under an overpass. That is not going to solve the problems in our city, and it is getting increasingly more severe. I look at a city like Seattle that has 200,000 fewer people than we have and 6 times as many people experiencing homelessness. I look at LA today that has 40,000 people who are experiencing homelessness. And if you go to those cities and ask them, obviously you're not doing what you needed to have done, what would you have done 6 years ago to avoid being where you are? And the answer from them is exactly the same. Find homes for people earlier when the challenge was smaller so that the issue and the challenge was more manageable. That's what we have to be doing in our city, and we can no longer satisfy ourselves with a process of ordinances that just move the problem from here to there, because it is a false sense of security. And before we wake up, we too are going to have 8,000, 10,000, 12,000 people. It is time for us to act now.
Any other thoughts from the panel about that idea of balancing the needs of people experiencing homelessness who need attention, care, places to go, and the needs of businesses, neighbors, and others who have some concerns there?
Sure. I think from the police department's perspective, one of the things that we are doing is we're going to continue our investment in the host team. We will continue to have that group work with those folks that are experiencing homelessness to see if there's opportunities to link them with services to help them along the path to becoming productive members of society again. And we have emphasized to the officers, and I think everyone recognizes this, we realize that at the end of this issue, although their numbers, we're talking about 2,000, we're talking about increases, at the end of this, each and every one is a person. And at the end of the day, every single police officer signed on to be a public servant. And the officers will continue their acts of compassion, will continue to check on individuals that may be sitting or lying, even just to make sure they're not in medical distress. So I expect the officers will continue those efforts. We will continue to work through the host team to try and be part of the solution, and then we will work with our elected officials to keep them informed of what we're seeing on the ground so that they will be informed in their future decision making.
Just to comment on the continuum, right? So looking at a person experiencing homelessness, we did an analysis in coordination with the city last year where we identified 90% of the people that are encountered are impaired in some way. So part of this is also a drug and alcohol addiction problem. The continuum also includes the need for more shelter, right? So yes, the answer is absolutely we need housing, but there are individuals that are on the street that need to be taken care of immediately. On Republic Square, I just want to comment on that. So you're absolutely right. Individuals are prohibited from camping in Republic Square. But again, I think it's a demonstration of the business community willing to work with individuals who are experiencing homeless and make accommodations for them to have a place to be. So rather than asking them to leave, we are doing everything that we can to accommodate their needs in the interim state.
And Chris Harris with Just Liberty.
Sure. Well, I think that the business community really has a lot of responsibility as it relates to this issue. If we look at some of the cities that we're often compared to, San Francisco and Seattle, we see some recent examples of where San Francisco last year has passed an expansive new business tax, which is going to be directed directly towards issues around homelessness, with the realization that it is the business community who, yes, has brought a lot of jobs and tax base, but who's also increased the cost of living in our communities. And this is directly tied to the increases in homelessness that we see in these cities. Whereas in Seattle, Amazon successfully defeated a similar tax. And so they are still struggling to find the funds necessary. And so we need to find ways that the business community can contribute to help solve the issue they've helped create.
Chris Harris with Just Liberty. Dee Peart with Downtown Austin Alliance, Austin Police Chief Brian Manley, and Austin Mayor Steve Adler. We thank you all so much for your time and participation this morning. This is a special broadcast about homelessness in Austin from Studio 1A on KUT 90.5. It's 9:30. Matt.
Get as close as you want to the microphone.
This is Morning Edition on KUT 90.5, Austin's NPR station. I'm Jennifer Staten. It's 9:31 on this Thursday morning. This is a special live broadcast about homelessness in Austin. We are joined now by two people directly impacted by all of this. Jesse Greiner and Philip Mitchell are both currently experiencing homelessness in Austin. We want to thank you so much for joining us this morning, Philip and Jesse.
You're welcome.
So I want to start out, first of all, if each of you could just describe for us a little bit about where you live and what your daily life is like. Tell us what a typical day is like for each of you.
You want to go first, or? Well,
This is Jesse.
hey, Jesse Griner. Yeah, generally I do the Challenger Street newspaper. The entire idea of our newspaper is actually a way for people to work instead of beg and actually create some type of a job basis. And what I really like about the Challenger newspaper, it does actually give me a chance to also express my opinion, and that's what the entire idea of the newspaper is about, is expressing your opinion and also creating jobs. That way you can try to work yourself out of poverty. I love Community First Village. I mean, they're just a God blessing. They really are. So is Trinity. Thank you for, once again, thank you, Trinity. I really liked all the stuff that I heard from the panel earlier, like Atler and the police officer. Yeah, it sounds like we're actually becoming very progressive, and we're going forward into seeing what the real problems are. And I loved how they said individuals, because everybody's an individual. Everybody thinks in a different, way. And taking care of each individual, especially, some people have, drugs and alcohol problems. Some people just end up having a lot of bad luck. There's also some people that need certain medication because they have a really hard time working or anything that they can stay on a actual function of a day-to-day basis life. Well, I like I said, with the newspaper, that kind of gives us a little bit of a way to do something like that. Mobiles and fishes. I mean, yeah. I probably just keep on re-saying that over and over again.
Well, thank you, Jesse. We do want to get lots of questions and answers in this morning. So, Philip, interested to hear from you. Share anything about your life, what your life is like right now, and any reactions you had to what you've heard so far this morning.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of living in a tent right now. I have been doing that for a while. I pretty much established my own within, like, keeping myself clean instead of going in certain facilities, because I find that some people aren't, I just don't get along with certain people, It's even hard to express it right now. But I just do things to try to keep me up in jobs. I've been through several tent places, and I'm not understanding why those aren't working out, because I know I'm a very productive individual. But I still got to get up and keep pressing forward within trying to survive.
Well,
So.
I think you're both speaking to a common misconception about people experiencing homelessness, which is that they don't want to work. And
Yeah.
that they're just kind of waiting for somebody to do something. You all are both speaking about a desire and capacity and want to work.
Yeah, and there's a lot of. I just got a job over at Conoco, and the main reason why I got the job is, fact, I wanted to pay taxes. It's like I was kind of feeling bad. I haven't paid taxes within over a year, and it's also, it's also a stepping stone. It only pays like $9 an hour, which anyone here in Austin knows that's impossible to survive off of $9 an hour, even if I was working 40 hours a week. It's one of the reasons why I actually became homeless, is because when I first got here, I was only making $5 an hour working at McDonald's. And I was also working at Papa Murphy's. So I was doing anywhere between, I guess, about 60 to easily 90 hours a week. And I barely could buy food. And that's one of the living wage was also a big thing. Richard Troxell, I do believe, was a big thing about living wage. I mean, you've probably heard it before that everybody's just one paycheck away from becoming homeless themselves. Unless you have like a good savings, that's actually, it's not just a cliche. And well, cliches usually are somewhat right. And anybody, I've met some people that have almost come close to having millions of dollars. There's one guy, the only reason why he didn't end up homeless in Austin is because he actually owned a house here in Austin, but he lost 4 houses in Vegas during the market crash. So he's just, everything he had just gone. I mean, it does happen. I mean, look at the Depression. How many people were homeless during that time?
Yeah, so Jesse, you're definitely speaking to affordability in Austin, also the precariousness of really anybody's situation. Philip, I want to follow up briefly. Our time is always going so fast. You mentioned how you're treated sometimes in Austin. Can you talk a little bit more about, you say you don't go into some places because you're kind of not sure what's going to happen. How do you experience life in Austin as someone experiencing homelessness? How are you treated?
Well, you got people that are generous, but then you got some people that are just unruly, nasty to you within the slander, like just to bring your mind frame down about trying to be a positive individual and try to make something for yourself. Just a news broadcast that we had when we were doing that in front of the tent when it had got burned down, there were several people that just passed by that were yelling out profane stuff to us, and so it's crazy.
It's frustrating.
So I'm hoping we are almost to the end of our segment, but I would love to hear from each of you what your hopes and plans, dreams are for the future. What would you like to have happen for yourselves?
I just need this homeless situation to basically change. Right now, my mind frame is I kind of live day for day and let the men upstairs guide me in my steps. So that's kind of where I am.
Jesse?
Me, I'm always trying to go forward. I have a lot of, I want to actually talk to mobiles of fishes and stuff like that. I have a bunch of different plans of stuff I would like to do. But I mean, I'm generally content as long as I have a somewhat safe place to stay. That's a big thing, is not being robbed, because you can ask so many homeless people. It's, okay, yay, I got this, I worked so hard to get this, and then the next day it's just gone. And it's like, well, most people, if they got their houses robbed, they would be just frustrated, terrified. Just with being homeless, you almost get to the point where you're just like, yep, have to start over again. Yeah, that's normal. And that can be very, very frustrating. The only thing I can say is I can hope for the best and try to do my best to go forward. I mean, there's not really much more to say other than that.
Jesse Greiner and Philip Mitchell, we thank you for joining us and for sharing your stories with us.
Thank you.
You're listening to a special broadcast about homelessness in Austin here on KUT 90.5. It's 9:41. This is Morning Edition on KUT 90.5. I'm Jennifer Staten. It's 9:42. You're listening to a special live broadcast this morning about homelessness in Austin. It's been the subject of a lot of emotional attention in Austin this summer, partly driven by a city council vote in June to approve $8.6 million to purchase land and a building for a new shelter in South Austin near Ben White and Bannister Lane. We have guests joining us now to discuss shelters and homelessness in Austin. Front Steps Executive Director Greg McCormick. Front Steps runs the Austin Resource Center for the Homeless. City Council District 5 member Ann Kitchen. Justin Berry, founding member of SAFE, Save Austin for Everyone, and Austin Police Association Vice President. Eileen McPhillips-Portner is Downtown Austin Neighborhood Association Board President, and we're also rejoined by Austin Police Chief Brian Manley. Lots of voices, not a lot of time, so we will get right to it. Greg, first of all, want to talk about the Arch. A lot of complaints that it's sort of devolved into a resource that's no longer effective and that's created a danger in downtown Austin. How do you respond to that?
Sure. Well, the Arch was built in 2004, and so that was about 15 years ago. It was built to sleep 100 men at that time, And in 2004, the community knew that it was underbuilt, that it wasn't big as we needed to help solve or alleviate some of the homeless issues. So I think we've known for a while that the Arch and other shelters have needed to expand. We haven't done a whole lot as far as establishing additional shelters in the community for about 15 years. I applaud the mayor and city council for taking on this issue now and really looking to provide more space, more shelters, and more services for those that are homeless. We're aware that the outside of the Arch has grown in population. It's a safety issue not only for the folks that are outside. It's not acceptable. It's a safety issue for our staff that are coming there to work and for clients that want to come inside. The majority of the folks that we're seeing outside are not coming inside and we are not turning anybody away. So I think that we have to engage with the people that are outside, find out what it is that they're needing, what's keeping them from coming into shelter or accessing services, and then look at establishing some of those avenues for them.
Chief Manley, there's been a lot of mention in news coverage recently about crime and violence downtown. Some of the coverage links that to the area around the Arch. Is that an accurate portrayal of what's happening downtown, specifically around the Arch?
No, I think we're seeing everything that is happening downtown be linked to homelessness because it is such a widespread discussion in the community right now. I can tell you that the incidents we've been talking about mostly over the past few weeks, that being the shootings that have taken place, 2 in the direct vicinity of the Arch, and then the one this past weekend that was just outside of police headquarters. We do not have any links to the Arch in any of those incidents, other than we know in one of them individuals involved hang around the Arch, but not seeking services there, not clients of the Arch.
Eileen, what do people living downtown tell Dana about the presence of the Arch?
People living downtown are disturbed at the exterior of the Arch at this period of time. We do know that good things are going on.
Eileen, if you can just get a little closer to the microphone.
We
Thank
do know
you.
that good things are going on inside the Arch. People downtown are aware of that and the case management that's going on there, and we're grateful for that. But the exterior does create safety concerns for businesses and for residents. We really would like to see, I was very happy that council is saying that they would like to have shelters in all of the districts, and people downtown would really like to see that occur because I think the Arch, its time has come and gone the way it is. But our neighbors, the homeless, are with us, and we do have to find a way to sustain them and get them back into a society and a place that we would all want to be happy to see them be at, and to be like who they are, our neighbors. And we also feel that the shelters that are coming into the neighborhoods need to be protected, they need to be safe, there do not need to be drug dealers outside of them. I think that we're really thrilled that that's happening, but we really have to promise our neighbors that when homeless shelters come into their neighborhoods, they're going to be safe, and for their children, the homeless, and the people within.
Councilmember Ann Kitchen, I want to ask you, the City Council by the end of the month will be discussing plans for some kind of shelter in each of the 10 council districts. So how can you explain and reassure people with concerns that there won't be an Arch type facility in each district?
Well, in June, we approved moving forward with a South Austin shelter, and that's a new kind of shelter. Basically, it's a housing-focused center that people go through and not to, and what that really means is it's a place that people have a safe, welcoming place to live and be connected to services to help them get into permanent housing. As we've said before, housing is what people need. So we listened, the council listened to the concerns that people had, and so we said we're going to do more than just promise. We're going to put in place legal restrictions on the use of that property that put in the law and put in writing how this place will operate. So we have said no drop-ins, no camping outside, a secure premise, services only available for people that are living there. And we ask our staff to develop that document and bring it back to the council for approval. So this is all about, this is really a place for people to live. And when people live there, they'll be focused on getting permanent housing, and they'll be there short term. And so this is not a place where people will hang out outside. It's not a drop-in center. It's not a day center. And we heard people's concerns. We know we have to get it right. We'll put it in a legal document, and it will be a good place for people to find a permanent place to live.
Justin Berry with SAFE, what are your concerns about locating shelters in neighborhoods?
I think that's one. I mean, we've heard several reasons why that's a concern for SAFE. Is that we've already have a homeless shelter downtown, which is around some residences, that's already not being. It's having the problems outside of the arch, and it's not what's occurring inside; it's what's occurring outside. And so logically, it follows that those same concerns that are currently happening now, that we are working on trying to get a control on. What reassurances are there currently in place that it's not going to be replicated? I just heard the councilwoman say that there's going to be written in law these things. Well, didn't we already have laws in place already around the arch that we've modified and changed? And I get that we want to help out our members and our fellow community members in the homeless community. I think every person here has a good heart and wants to see them succeed in life, because that's what it should be about. But currently, right now, until we can address this violent crime issue that's occurring around these areas, we need the reassurances that they're not going to replicate in the neighborhoods.
Well, and there are changing rules at the Arch going into effect, I believe, beginning October, that will change rules and operations there, correct?
That's right. So going forward, you know, and looking at historically, when the Arch was created, it was created at a time when affordability in Austin, people did just need a little time, a little place to get healthier, to get on their feet, to get that job, and they were probably able to get into housing at that time. That obviously is not the situation now. It's very, very difficult to live in Austin, and so the individuals that we're working with that are coming to the shelter are needing more assistance. And so I think what you're seeing is an adjustment to the system, additional resources being brought forward. We've always been housing focused, but now we are going to double down on that. We are going to help people get into housing rapidly, support them while they're in housing, while they're getting on their feet, and then we know that rapid rehousing works, that ultimately within 6 to 9 months, individuals will be able to take care of themselves.
So we only have about a minute left, so I'm going to say in advance I may have to cut you off, but I want anybody to hop in who feels like it. So there are civic groups or neighborhood groups who are worried. They're concerned about shelters in districts. Is that a legitimate concern? Councilmember Kitchen, you wanted to hop in?
Yes, first off, we're not talking about shelters in the middle of neighborhoods. That's not what's happening in South Austin. The second thing is, yes, people have legitimate concerns. What we're talking about is legal restrictions on the use of property. We have not done that before, and that's not in the law right now.
Anybody else want to hop in? Got about 30 seconds.
I think one of the concerns we have, though, is it's what happens in the surrounding area. Though it may not be in the immediacy of literally next door to a neighborhood, it's what the fallout is. Is it near the school systems where the children walk to get to school? Is it along certain areas where people walk and commute? We have to worry about these kinds of things that can impact the community as a whole that travel in those areas around these shelters. Because right now, as it stands, you can't even walk outside of the arch without having to walk in the streets or walk across the street without fear of being assaulted or hurt.
Much more discussion to come on this. We will not leave the topic there, but we are short on time this morning. Justin Berry, co-founder of SAFE, Austin City Council District 5 member and Kitchen. Greg McCormick with Front Steps, Downtown Austin Neighborhood Association Board President. Eileen McPhillips-Portner, Austin Police Chief Brian Manley. Thank you all for joining us this morning. This is a special live broadcast on homelessness in Austin here on KUT 90.5. It's 9:52. I'm Jennifer Staten. It's 9:53. We are bringing you a special live broadcast this morning about homelessness in Austin. We've heard from people experiencing homelessness, from police, from city officials, from neighborhoods and activists. We're now going to check in with service providers who work directly with people experiencing homelessness. Kathy Ridings is Social Services Director for the Salvation Army Austin. Irit Umani is Executive Director of Trinity Center, a downtown faith-based organization running programs that serve the spiritual, emotional, and physical needs of people in Austin who are poor and homeless. We thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting us.
And I want to ask, first of all, and I know this is not a one-size-fits-all answer, but I think it's important to talk about, and a lot of questions we got ahead of time asked, what factors tend to lead people to find themselves without a home? What are some of the root causes of homelessness?
Well,
First and foremost, it's a lack of affordable housing. I think in addition, one of the engines that drives homelessness is poverty, and we don't always remember that. But it's also people who do not have family support system to back them up. Something I like to ask people to do is think of your own extended family, and you could probably identify people who would be homeless if your family wasn't there to support them. People who are homeless have all the same problems that the rest of us have.
Well, I want to go to try and kill the myth that I think is in the root of homelessness all over the country, and that is that every person can pull themselves by their own bootstraps. And we are all being educated around that, and it's the biggest lie in the US of A, because not only not everybody can pull themselves by their own bootstrap, nobody, not one person can do that. We had family to help us, we had community to help us, we know where to go when we are in trouble, we have people to talk to, we have people that will take us in if we fall out of housing, and the country is built on that myth, which enable us to not care, because if everybody can take care of themselves, why do we need to take care of them? And it's lacking compassion, it's not real, and it, to me, is mind-blowing that a country that think of itself as the best place on earth allows millions, hundreds of thousands of people to live on the street and then judge them for being on the street. So we need to start with killing that myth that is not true for anybody, and stop blaming the people and do much better in helping the people. So when the mayor fabulously said that it will be reflected in the next budget, I want to know the number. I want to know the number of units that will be offered. And if there will be a shelter in each district, which we should have, I want to know when, because right now we decided to lower the number of people that the Arch is going to serve, and all the rest is for later. Yes, we will open a shelter somewhere in such and such district at a later day, and we will have more shelters at a later days. And meanwhile, what we did is we lowered the number of people that we are going to serve instead of increasing it. So I want to know, and another myth, if I may.
Well, we're running short on time, and I want to get another question to both of you, because I think this is something that's on the minds of a lot of people, and it's more of a philosophical question. When I see somebody on the street who's asking for money, my inclination is I want to give them money because I think that's helpful. Is that helpful? To help somebody in that immediate instance with money, as service providers, what do you all want people to do?
Well, I think it's a very personal decision how you react to somebody who's asking you for money. I think what we try to message out, though, is if you want to give to causes and programs that have evidence-based results and are really changing people's lives. And I think that has a bigger impact.
Although I work with homeless people who are homeless every day, I always have dollar bills in my car. And I think that if a person is willing to stand for 8 hours in any intersection in 104 degrees, it's not up to me to decide if they need a bottle of water or my dollar. I'll give them the dollar and they'll do with it whatever they may. That's my approach.
And briefly, in the less than a minute we have left from each of you, what's one thing that you have seen work in getting people into housing?
Having housing opportunities, having units to move them to. It's very simple. We are lacking housing. People are waiting on our waiting list for years to get housing. So we say we're going to do rapid rehousing without having the units to house them. I don't buy them until I see the units. We need housing, and we need housing that comes with wraparound services. And it costs money, but it's much cheaper than prisons and emergency rooms.
And Kathy, briefly?
Well, I think efforts like the one we did to house veterans is what works. Leadership, like we had from the mayor's office, collaboration, like we had with the VA, with ECHO, with private landlords. I think that's how we get it done.
Kathy Ridings and Irit Umani, thank you for joining us this morning. This is KUT 90.5.